there's some songs where they're kind of going crazy for the whole track, and he's just floating over, or it's Elena on flute, and it's just kind of like this ethereal kind of feel, but you just have a lot of like rhythmic content underneath that.
Hi, guys. Welcome to this week's episode of Grooves of Influence. My name's Xavier, your host, and this week I am excited to be joined by guest artist Alvin Cobb Jr. Thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, and I love your work. I love what you're doing. And if you want to share a little bit about yourself, like what do you do? How did you get into music? I'd love to hear that.
So I was born in Atlanta. I live in Chicago now. Um, my dad put me in drum lessons when I was 10. So that was my first introduction, but I didn't really like it for a while because it kind of felt like a chore at first. But once I got into high school, I got more into like marching band and actually sing drums in like a practical performance aspect, and kind of fell in love with it towards the end of high school.
Do you think it was the aspect of like performing that might have changed your perspective versus just being in a practice room type of thing?
Yeah, it's tough because I I would go to like my lessons once a week, and then the only other time would be alone in my room. So you're not really seeing the actual effect that music can have and that relationship between the performer and audience. So it just felt like an extension of like school homework for a while. But yeah, I remember going into ninth grade and doing the drum line at my high school, and it was like my first time consistently playing with people. And yeah, it's just a different energy that comes with like creating and collaborating with someone else and actually getting an immediate response from a listener. Yeah, so I think that was a big difference.
Yeah, I think drums are also an interesting instrument in the sense of like they're the glue of music oftentimes in a
Yeah,
lot of genres. So it's like without other things around it, it doesn't have the same effect, I feel like sometimes in certain songs, because it's like it's so important for just like the flow of songs. You can completely change how a song sounds just by different drum beats. It's kind of cool.
yeah. And I think that's why it's important to, there's some aspect to studying drums that's going to be academic and isolating, but I think it is good to explore the functional purpose of like percussion and groove and all those things. So yeah, I agree.
And speaking of groove, every episode I ask the same question, and I'm just curious, what would you say is the most influential album to you?
So when you sent me this, I kind of was having a tough time figuring it out, but I settled on Christian Scott, Chief Adjuah's Stretch Music. It came out in 2015. I believe this month or next month is actually the 10th anniversary of that album. Um, until recently, I hadn't, it had been a while since I'd actually listened through it. And I took the last few days to actually listen to it quite a bit, and didn't realize like how much of an impact it actually had on the music I make. Um, yeah, I know when I was in college, Robert Glasper was kind of top of the food chain in terms of like his experiment band and their concept of like molding hip hop and jazz together and neo soul. But I think what was special for me once Christian Scott kind of started his music movement, um, it was his ability to incorporate Southern hip hop. And I think being from Atlanta, I don't know, there was something nostalgic about him being able to take straight ahead jazz elements, but also place like 808s and trap grooves underneath, as opposed to the like more East Coast, like or Detroit Dilla kind of influence. Those kind of dominating everything. I think as a Southerner, I just really was drawn to what Christian has been we're doing.
Yeah, I wasn't fully sure. I was listening to the album. I was like, "Is that 808? Like,
Yeah,
is
yeah,
that like a drum machine that he's playing
yeah,
around with?" And that's crazy. Because he doesn't just incorporate that. Like in certain songs, I feel like he does a drum kit and that. Like he
yeah.
uses both to make the percussion for the songs. So it's pretty interesting. So when was the first time you found it? How did you come across it?
I think it was just word of mouth. I had a lot of friends who were like, "Yo, you need to check out this album," and yeah, I fell in love with it immediately. And I think they did a tiny disc like very soon after that. Uh, I like watched a bunch of times because it was interesting hearing the produced version of the album and hearing it in a more stripped down uh, context. But they actually came to Chicago for the Jazz Fest in either 2015 or 2016. And yeah, I was super, well, I was sitting super close and I was like just amazed at how they were actually able to like keep the energy of the album in like a live setting.
How, I mean, as a performer with your own music, I mean, you mentioned there's similarities. Could you kind of go into what you see similar in your music and this album specifically?
So I think the big thing for me is the soundscape of blending acoustic instruments with like more produced um, aspects. I don't know what they did in the studio, but just from listening, I feel like they were able to do so much of it live. Um, I think on my end, when we were working on my first project, we would play a lot of things live and then kind of go back and tweak things and add samples and do that kind of thing. But I think the soundscape is definitely pretty similar, especially in the lower range because his band also uses upright bass on top of like 808s and that kind of thing. And I've always just really liked that texture of having an acoustic bass versus just relying on maybe electric bass or just the 808 to kind of fill out the low end. So the texture of everything. Also, I like how he deals with form, which is something I've kind of taken where you have these long stretches where it's just kind of a groove that loops and there's still form, but it gives the band the chance to kind of float over for a while. Because for a lot of his songs, because I know on the album he has two drummers, Joe Dyson and Corey Fomble. I'm like huge fans of both of them. And there's some songs where they're kind of just kind of going crazy for the whole track. And
Yeah.
he's just floating over, or it's Elena on flute. And it's just kind of like this ethereal kind of feel, but you just have a lot of like rhythmic content underneath that. And that's a concept I kind of bring to my trio where being aware of what's everybody's role and not necessarily we all have to play intense at the same time. Um, Especially because Katie, the bassist, is also the main vocalist for us. And writing for her, I don't want to give her a bunch of lyrics to have to sing because it kind of makes her have to sacrifice her bass playing. But
Hmm.
Julius and I are able to like rhythmically fill in that space. So I think that's what I really like about Trio in particular because it's very democratic and we kind of have to pick our lane and kind of do our job in that sense. So I think conceptually the way he uses just different sounds and effects over everything, and then just leaving space for like rhythmic and repeating sections. I think I really was inspired by this project.
Yeah, it creates like this underlying like soundscape in some of these songs, like you're saying, and then it's just like it feels like it's like a floating aspect on top. Like they're just
Yeah.
kind of doing their thing, but somehow it still intertwines, somehow it still connects. Like it doesn't feel quite off, but you can definitely tell there is some form of separation, which is pretty cool. You mentioned trios. I mean, how long have you been in your trio? Like, have you ever done different, worked in different groups? Like, what's been your experience there?
So I've played in ensembles from duos up to big bands, but in terms of my own music, I had like a short-lived sextet that I maybe did a gig or two with, and I was like, this is a little too much. But I actually started my trio during the pandemic. I think in the year before I was playing quite a bit, but I think a lot of musicians can attest to this. There's a trade-off for gigging a lot where you kind of feel like you're on a hamster wheel after a while. And I was starting to feel that where I didn't really have a creative outlet for myself. Was thankful to play with a bunch of great ensembles, but it was starting to um, kind of feel like the same day over and over again. But when the shutdown happened, it kind of gave a lot of artists the time to reevaluate their relationship with art and what they actually wanted to do. So at the time, Julius and I were living together, and we would kind of work on as much music as we could. And one day I just went to him and I was like, would you want to be in a band that I want to put together? So he said he was down, and I had played with Katie a few times prior to that, so I knew if I had a bassist, I wanted her to be that bassist, and the fact that she sings was kind of a cheat code
Mm-hmm.
for that. So we started doing these live streams from our living room
Oh,
back
very cool.
in 2020, and it was a way to not only raise money for us, but I kind of used it as an opportunity to kind of raise money for a bunch of different charity organizations. So over like those next 2 years, we were just playing virtually, but we were able to kind of build an audience that way. And once things started opening up here in Chicago, our first gig was actually a jazz festival, the Hyde Park Jazz Festival. So we had never played live for our audience, so they kind of like plopped us in front of this festival, and we um, kind of had to figure things out from there. But yeah, the trio, I think you with smaller ensembles, you can actually it's more intimate and you can actually connect in a real way. Um, that I think personally for me, I struggled with larger ensembles because it kind of felt like autopilot, where it's like, oh, as the drummer, your role is more rigid versus in a smaller group, we can kind of play off each other a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you saying that because I'm trying to I think the song "Running in Sevens" in the album, uh, where it's just the drummer and I think a bass, just a little
Yeah,
bit, and it's interesting because like the drummer in the small group setting like that gets to lead the song. Like it's
yeah,
his
yeah,
song, even though, it's drums are thought of more rhythmically. It's like the way he's playing is almost melodic. It's
yeah,
pretty
yeah,
cool, to see how in small groups, like you're saying, you can expand your role. And you're not held on to just traditional kind of instrumentation, that people
yeah.
use in different genres and stuff. So when you guys were doing those live streams, what were you playing? Were you guys like just doing jam sessions, or like were you playing the songs that are on your album, or kind of what was that like?
So I was actually trying to like figure out a couple things out at the same time. So I used it as a chance so we could kind of figure out what things work for us sound wise. So a lot of it was just covers and arrangements of like standards or compositions from other artists.
Mhm.
um, which was kind of low risk because there was no like need to sell anything. It was just trying to get as many eyes as we could. Also, just played because all our gigs were dried up because of the lockdown. Um, so it was mostly other people's music um, until we started doing live shows, and then a lot of people in the audience would ask, like, "Oh, do y'all have CDs or are you on streaming?" And then it was always awkward when I had to tell them, like, "No, we don't really exist yet." But you can look at our YouTube videos. But yeah, I started doing original music more so out of necessity and demand rather than me actually just wanting to. I was just cool just playing, to be honest, and just getting used to leading a band consistently for the first time. But yeah, I remember this lady from Detroit specifically. She like got super upset that we didn't have CDs after our show, and I was like, you're right. I'm sorry." And so like a few months after that, I kind of tapped into some secret music I had that I had no intention of sharing, but I was like, maybe it's time to actually like develop this, and that's the music that ended up being on the debut album.
That's cool. What made it secret?
I think the source material. So the album is kind of centered around this theoretical conversation with my younger self. And the idea came from like a counseling therapy program I was in my first year of college at Florida State. And the prompt they gave us was like, what advice would you give to younger students or your younger self? So it's like very introspective and like kind of cringe because like as you get older, the advice you would give changes. And I think I was a little afraid to share too much of myself. Like I was cool just sitting behind the drum set. Um, and basically they were functioning as diary entries. They start off just like written notes, and then a lot of the stuff I would make voice memos on my phone and kind of like hum melodic ideas, and then eventually they would turn into full songs after a while. But yeah, I guess fear was like the main reason.
Yeah. It's hard. I mean, just being open and expressing yourself fully and completely, something like that, I imagine it's difficult. So what was the moment you decided that it kind of pushed you over the edge to be able to release it? I mean, you mentioned that lady in Detroit. Was it that, or was it something inside of you that just said, this is it?
Honestly, I would say it was that moment because up until then, the concept of someone wanting my original music seemed so foreign to me. So it was very strange that someone was like so passionate about like, oh, I want what y'all are doing. And I think it was a big confidence boost, especially when we had that residency. And um, yeah, we had I guess to kind of go back, we had a year-long residency at Andy's Jazz Club here in Chicago downtown. And the cool thing about playing there is it's in the middle of downtown, so we really didn't have to promote much because there was a lot of tourists coming all the time. So most of the shows were sold out, just from the strength of the Andy's name. So we kind of used that year to just develop the original music because prior we had just been doing covers and arrangements, but I kind of used this year to like sneak in original music and kind of develop that. And it was cool to see um, the audience reaction in real time to the music and saying what worked and what didn't. And in that sense, like a lot of times jazz is more similar to stand-up comedy for us, where we kind of tour and perform before we release an album or a special. Um, but yeah, I think that residency and that encounter that happened during the residency was a turning point in terms of like this could be an actual thing long term.
That's awesome. And just going back to the album, I just always like asking, like, is there any specific songs on this album that you're like, this is a must listen, or you grabbed something from specifically um, from it?
Um, I think the song that kind of got us that we're associated with the most is Window. Um, it's towards the end of the album, but it was one of the first songs that we started playing live. And the backstory of that song is very soon after I moved to Chicago, I was in a pretty rough car accident. Headed to a show, and like it was a hit and run, and they like hit the right side of the car, and I was in the passenger seat, and like I still have some arm issues from it, but I was in physical therapy for a little while, and it like completely has changed how I play and how I have to approach music. Um, but I think I sang the melody to that song back in 2014 and didn't finish writing it until 2022. So it was just like an idea I had on my phone that I kind of reaccessed. But yeah, that one it's has a samba groove under it. Um, Brazilian music I've always loved. One of my first drum teachers was from Brazil when I was living in Atlanta. So it just from that sense it kind of was a way of reconnecting to what was familiar during a very like uncomfortable time.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, Brazilian music is epic.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's awesome that you had that kind of teacher and going back to your roots after a moment um,
yeah,
of extreme distress, is cool. I mean, it's coming your art seems so authentic, man. I mean, such it's coming from such a place of just authenticity of who you are and it's awesome to see that and I feel like in jazz, it can kind of, I mean, some jazz, I think it's more obvious, but it's not always the easiest genre to associate like true authenticity to if you aren't a big jazz listener, I think
yeah,
in general, like if you aren't really into it, but I think your music's pretty accessible in the sense of like, it's pretty obvious,
yeah.
definitely like with including like lyrics and just the way the music makes you feel. It's really cool.
Well, I appreciate it. I think it took me a while to get there because I think I'm thankful for jazz school, but I think sometimes we can get a little caught up with ourselves in terms of how complex can we make things, and which is I mean, you can do that, but uh don't be surprised when like someone that may not be a musician has a hard time connecting with it. And I think the artists I've always been inspired by have been able to make complex things feel approachable and simple. And I think early on, I was like a lot of young jazz musicians, I was just trying too hard to impress other musicians. And I think once I started this group, it was a way for me to reset and actually just kind of calm down. And yeah, and I think the vocal aspect is a way of emotionally connecting. You can do it instrumentally, but I think having lyrics gets a lot of people there quicker in terms of connecting with the music.
For sure. Like it's just an accessibility thing. I mean, words are
Yeah,
powerful.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
They're extremely powerful. Has it always been jazz for you? Has it always kind of because like you said you were kind of when you were a kid, you were kind of more on the marching side, which um, a little bit different, but then when did you transition to jazz? Like when was that for you?
So there's not a lot of musicians per se in my family, but I'm thankful to come from a family of like people that appreciate music and art. And like my dad played a little bit when he was in high school, and around those years, but he didn't do it professionally. But I would say my first exposure to music was probably at church growing up. And even though I didn't play, a lot of that music is still very near and dear to me. And as I started getting interested in drums, I think like Southern marching bands were what I saw the most. Both my parents went to HBCUs, and I was just lucky to be around that culture of like seeing these big marching bands and drum lines all the time. And yeah, growing up in Atlanta while they were filming Drumline was such a cool experience, and kind of seeing the excitement around that. But and originally I was going to go to school for engineering. That was kind of like my plan, and like I did pretty well in like math and science. So I was just like, I guess I'll do this. And then I did the science fair in high school, and I was like, I don't think I want to. Like, I respect what everyone's doing, but I don't think this is for me. So I had been playing, like taking drum set lessons and doing marching band at that time, and I saw a flyer for the Georgia All State jazz auditions, and I like went up to my band director. I was like, "Is it cool if I do this? Like, I haven't done anything like this before." And he was like, "Yeah, go for it." So I auditioned, and I like ended up making the All State band as like a alternate drummer. So they had the main drummer, and I kind of like filled in and did auxiliary stuff. And I think that was the first time I was in like a very intense like jazz space with other kids that were really into it. And I was coming in very green. So but I'm like meeting kids that have been going to jazz camps since they were in elementary school, and like going to New York all the time to see like world class people. And I think for me, the fact that I was able to get into that room meant I wasn't terrible at it. And I remember talking to my dad after that. I was like, I think I want to go into music. Like I don't have it all figured out, but I knew if I wanted to study drum set at the collegiate level, you were probably going to have to study jazz somewhere. So I wasn't like this huge jazz aficionado in high school. Like I'm like a '90s baby from Atlanta, so it was very much like
Yeah.
hip hop, R&B was like the main stuff I was listening to at
Hmm.
the time, and like pop punk and that kind of stuff. So I think for me, college was when kind of my crash course into like actually studying the music. And like after 4 years, well, for me, 6 years of like intense study, it's like very hard to shake that off. So now I think it's just figuring out like respectful ways to blend all the influences.
That's awesome. And so we've mentioned it a few times. We've kind of discussed your album a little bit. Um, I mean, is there anything else you'd want to share? I mean, if people want to listen to it, where can they find it? You also mentioned some YouTube stuff. So,
Yeah, so we have a YouTube channel. Hasn't been the most active recently, but we have uh the single, the music video from the album. The song's called Mind Your Heart. It's a really cool black and white music video directed by Shiloh Tumo Washington, who's like a young, great filmmaker here in Chicago. Um, but also on the YouTube channel, there's a bunch of clips from our live streams that we did over the years. So you can check the covers out there. But my debut album is called You'll Need This Later, and it came out in May of last year. It's available on all your streaming services. It's also on Bandcamp for those on Bandcamp. I have maybe 5 CDs left. I'm almost sold out. But you can order it through my Bandcamp site. Um, Yeah, so that's what we have out now. I'm kind of laying low. We're in the process of recording my next album right now, so I'm like finishing up like edits on the compositions, and we actually go into the studio in 3 weeks. So really excited
Awesome.
about that.
Yeah. Me too, dude. That sounds awesome. Well, can't wait to hear it when it comes out.
Oh, thank you.
Be sure to check it out, guys, and let's buy those last 5 CDs.
Yeah,
Let's sell you out. But that's awesome, dude. Yeah. Once again, dude, it's been awesome talking to you. I appreciate you coming on the show and just sharing your story, sharing about music. It's always fun talking about jazz.
oh,
Um,
definitely. Yeah, thank you for having me. I really
yeah.
appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Is there anything else you like to, just share with the audience before we go?
Um, yeah, I'm on uh social media for those of you that use that. It's just Alvin Cobb Jr. on most of the sites. Also follow like my bandmates, Katie Ernst. She's like a great bassist and vocalist, and she's been on tour with Iron and Wine, but she also has a lot of cool original music, like her band Twin Talk. She has a cool duo project called Wayfaring with artists actually out of Washington, I believe. James Falzone. He's a great woodwind player, and yeah, go follow her, and then the pianist in our group, Julius Tucker. Who you saw perform. He's incredible. If there's a piano being played at night in Chicago, he's probably going to be one of them. He has a trio in town that's starting to pick up steam, and he's also a great DJ, house DJ, and he releases mixes every now and then. So definitely support them because the only reason I've been able to do all the stuff I've been able to do for the last 5 years is because of them. So definitely give them some love.
For sure. For sure. Well, it's been good, man. Thank you so much, and can't wait to listen to that new album.
Yeah, yeah, it'll be out in the spring, hopefully.